My name is Larissa, and the majority of the time, I'm home by myself. Both of my parents work. My older brother, John, is gone most days, either working part-time or with his friends. I'm 16 and considered old enough to be on my own. I remember telling my brother bye as he walked out the front door to go to work. I went upstairs and I was lying on my bed watching YouTube videos. I was sort of flipping and scrolling through, not particularly watching anything for too long, when I heard a noise from downstairs. The best description I can give you is that it sounded like somebody was dragging the top end of a broom across our kitchen floor. I knew I was the only one home, and my paranoia was beginning to get the best of me. I started to fear that I hadn't locked all the doors or double-checked anything, because it caught me so off guard that I ran down the steps looking to see where it came from, which in retrospect was dumb, especially if anyone happened to be down there, but I saw nothing. The broom was in its normal place. I tried to rationalize what the noise could have been. Maybe kids were riding on their roller skates or skateboarding going by. So I chalked it up to being something outside, but I stayed in the living room this time. I flopped down on my couch and again began scrolling through YouTube, and this time I heard a couple of bumps come from upstairs. The way our living room was designed, our couch was directly in the middle of the room, with various pieces of furniture around it. A couple of feet away from the couch was a staircase that led back upstairs. I was sitting on the couch and facing directly towards the stairs. After I heard the noises, I waited but didn't hear anything else. But as I continued scrolling on my phone, now looking at Instagram, I raised my eyes towards the staircase, and the second to last time I looked up the stairs, I saw a shadow. This blotchy, black figure crossed my room. My room door was open, and the sun was shining through one of the windows, which was casting into the hallway, and I could see it very clearly from the couch. I froze, staring up the stairs, and again tried to rationalize it. Could it have been a bird? But a bird wouldn't have taken up that entire space as the shadow did. It moved pretty quickly, so, again, I couldn't tell whether or not it was an animal. At this point, I was starting to get scared, so I called my friend Alexis and asked her if she could stay on the phone with me because my house was freaking me out. She asked me why, and I told her the handful of things that had happened, and she told me not to be too afraid, and that it just sounded like the house was settling. I guess completely disregarding the fact that I saw a figure. We talked for a while, and by this time it was getting dark. I went over to the kitchen and after rummaging through my refrigerator, pulled out a lasagna for my dinner. My brother had texted me to say he'd be home in about an hour, and it started to make me feel a little better knowing someone was going to be home soon. As I put the lasagna in, I sat at our dining room table, still talking to my friend. This time, we were on video chat. Our kitchen and living room were attached, and where I was sitting at the dining room table, to the right of me is the kitchen, but the closest thing to me is the island. I just settled myself into one of the kitchen chairs when the light in the kitchen started to flicker. Now my friend was on the phone, so she saw this too, and immediately pointed out that it was really creepy. My heart started racing because I didn't have any other light on in the house at the time, and if that one went out, I was going to be in complete darkness, which scared me the most, and I guess this factor made it harder for me to move. After sitting still as a stone in my chair for a moment, I got over my fear and ran towards the light for the dining room, flipping it on. As I turned around, the light in the kitchen shattered completely, and I flinched. I still had my phone in my hand, and my friend asked if I was okay. I was looking up at the light, inspecting it to see if any sparks were going to come out of it. Then I inched my gaze to the counter and saw something peeking at me over the island. This is truly something I will never forget. Because the kitchen was now dim, since there was no light, the only available light was coming from the dining room. So the kitchen wasn't completely engulfed in darkness. It was just a little murky. But whatever this was, I could clearly see the eyes of it. They were gleaming, almost shiny, and the eyes I could make out had deep dark bags underneath them. And when I finally looked at it, I felt its eyes zero in on me. I realized now that I had gone quiet, and my friend was calling my name over the phone, asking if I was okay. I screamed as it looked like it began to rise, as if it were squatted behind the counter. At first I thought whatever it was a little kid, but as it began to raise higher, I saw a very strange curved nose, but didn't wait for anything else, as instinctively I tossed my phone in its direction and went running out the door. Just as I was running out the front door, my brother was coming up the walkway to the house, and I slammed into him. He was trying to get me to calm down, but I was freaking out and asked him if we could leave. Thankfully, he didn't ask any questions and ran up to the door long enough to lock it behind us. Once we got in his car and drove around for a couple of minutes, I told him everything. He listened rather intently and then said that he didn't want to tell me right as it happened, but when he went up to lock the door, he saw a weird shadowy figure standing in the kitchen. He said it was disproportionate, it had long fingers and legs, and that he couldn't believe what he was seeing. We got home later that night, and he let me stay in his room. The only other thing that I can offer to this story is that my friend Alexis, when I threw my phone, also saw the shadowy figure. But it was in the corner of our kitchen, and where I dropped my phone, she could see it far clearer than my brother could. But just as I have said, the most she remembers were the eyes, staring directly into the phone. And she hung up shortly after because she was so afraid. This creepy incident happened to me back when I used to live with my aunt. On this day, my uncle had to be rushed to the hospital. He had fallen, hit the back of his head, and wasn't breathing. Thankfully, he was able to be revived, but I was left alone to watch the house. I was 18 years of age around this time, and I remember being really scared about the situation with my uncle. I called periodically throughout the day to check and see if he was all right. Around 7 or so, they said he was stable. From all the adrenaline that had been rushing through me most of the day, I had grown rather tired, and through text told my aunt that I was going to lay down for a little bit and that I'd call her when I woke up. I went to my room and laid down, and after a little bit, I fell asleep. I woke up randomly in the middle of the night to what felt like a rush of air blowing directly on my face. I opened my eyes slightly for a second, but figured it was the air conditioner kicking in. I woke up again, maybe an hour later, to some wet sensation on my fingers. I had my arm outstretched, and it was hanging off the bed slightly. I laid there for a second, trying to figure out how my aunt's dog had gotten out of his kennel, before I realized that Petey, his name, wasn't home at all. They'd left him at a close friend's house for a weekend. As I had this realization, I yanked my arm away, rolling over on the other side of the bed and looking down at the floor. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear a low rumble. Not so much as a growl per se, but a mixture between a hum and a groan. It lasted for a couple of seconds, and then there was nothing. I didn't think to tell my aunt about it simply because too much had been going on, and I didn't want to add on to everything she was already dealing with. But it was a pretty bizarre thing to happen to me, considering I didn't have anything else happen after or before being in that house. My brother and his wife live in a haunted house as far as I'm concerned. He doesn't seem to believe it, but his wife, my sister-in-law, and I are convinced that it is true. We've had an insane amount of stories that we could tell about this house, but this one is my own. It pretty much solidified the fact that something was going on in that house, but also kept me from going over for any future occasions. On this night, my brother was working late, and my sister-in-law, Katie, offered to go pick us up some food. We both agreed on Chinese food, but the place was about 40 minutes away from where they lived, and since I was visiting, she made it a point that she wanted to go and get the food, and insisted that she didn't care about the drive. I offered to go with her, but she recommended that I rest from my trip and get settled in. They had a really nice house, 3 stories in all, and I was staying on the 2nd story. I was in one of their guest rooms and started to unpack my bags. Katie had set it up pretty nicely for me, so I didn't have to do as much. After I was done unpacking, I flopped over the bed and laid down for a while. I fell asleep for a couple of minutes, it felt, when I got a call from Katie saying that the food was going to take a little longer because they had a long line of people there. I told her it was fine and not to worry, and we hung up. Where I was laying on the bed now, I was on my stomach with my head propped up on my hand, and I was scrolling through my phone. I scrolled for a while when I felt something tug on the comforter I was lying on. I paused, looking down at the end of the bed, and of course, saw nothing. Without really paying much attention to it, I went back to my phone, scrolling again until a couple of minutes later, the tug happened again. I put my phone down and again leaned over and looked at the end of the bed. The mattress had one of those mattress covers on it that crinkled every time you moved, and the cover began to move. It felt like, or rather, sounded like nails digging into the bed as the cover was being pulled off. Now, of course, because I'm on top of it, I'm being pulled too by whatever force this is, and I start to freak out, and I flop my way across the bed until I'm laying on the floor. When I stood up, I saw the rest of the comforter slide slowly off the bed. I was so scared I didn't know what to do. In a moment of desperation, I screamed, "Get the fuck out of here!" Whether my outburst did something or not, I don't know. But I stood in that corner for a good 15 minutes. Frozen because I was so afraid. I didn't know what I was up against. I couldn't see anything, and by the time I got the courage to move, I heard Katie downstairs opening up the front door. I ran down the steps, and when I reached her, told her what happened. She listened to me and apologized, saying that she didn't know what happened or even had an explanation for it, but that she could put me in another room if that made me feel more comfortable. I wanted to tell her as kindly as possible that I wanted to leave, but instead agreed to just move rooms. She was being so hospitable. And even though I couldn't explain it, and I was scared shitless, I did want to spend time with my brother and her. So they moved me into another room, this time on the first floor, where they were staying. It was a room right next to theirs. I helped Katie move out whatever needed to be moved. I felt really bad that she was trying to accommodate me so much, but I knew I couldn't stay in that room, and I still hadn't really processed what had happened. By the time we got settled, I had sort of forgotten about it, and when my brother came home, we spent a good amount of time together. It was only before I went to bed that I heard noises coming from the second floor. The house was 3 stories with an entry and a staircase leading to each story. My brother had installed doors near or at the top of each staircase so that at night they locked each one. So, in the event that an intruder was able to get in, the house had multiple doors to get through before they could actually reach anyone. A smart idea, and probably what kept me safe this night. My room was next to my brother's room, but my room was the last room before the door that led to the staircase moving to the second floor. Right as I was about to fall asleep, I heard pounding footsteps coming up the stairs. Very slow and very precise. I knew that my brother and Katie had already gone to bed, because they had said goodnight to me before they did, my brother locking the upstairs door before they went in their room. So I just sat there, listening to whatever happened to be in this house, walking up and down the stairs. This went on for a good 10 minutes or so, until I could hear whatever it was stop at the door of the staircase. I heard the knob jiggle, and the only reason that I could hear it so clearly was that my door was still open, and if I angled myself correctly, I could have seen the door from where my room was. It kept jiggling for a while, and then abruptly I heard whatever it was race back down the stairs, hitting what sounded like the second-story landing and knocking into the door down there. Now again, I'm scared shitless. I don't know what's happening, and Katie and my brother didn't seem to react to the noises at all. Which I know with 100% certainty they heard, considering the fact that their room was directly next to mine. After I was sure there were no more noises, I rushed to my door and slammed it, locking it shut and pushing the dresser in front of it. The morning after, I told Katie again what happened, because my brother wasn't as accepting of those types of stories as Katie was. She apologized again and said that if I didn't want to stay there, I didn't have to, and that she knew stuff had been going on in the house for a while, but didn't know how to bring it up to me, and that my brother was doing everything in his power to completely ignore what was going on. Which I guess I understand to an extent. It was a pretty nice house, 3 stories, really big backyard. So I suppose when you have all that, it becomes easier to ignore.